basically keep you awake for another half hour here. You have Mass a little later after this, and also help you to understand a little bit about why, the Church wants you to learn about other alternatives for family planning. And the topic I used to give, which was natural alternatives for family planning, that's kind of cut and dry and boring, and I thought, really, when you think about it, and in all my 30-plus years as a doctor, every time I've had an opportunity to discuss this with my patients, ultimately they like it. They like it. They see it as good. And they see ultimately in their relationships, they're able to bring out more of the beautiful aspects of being married, and certainly, as it says here, the reclaiming the good and the beautiful in life is what we all want for our marriages, right? We all want what's good and what's beautiful. And honestly, that's a big emphasis these days in the Catholic Church. There's a lot of rules and regulations in the Catholic Church, right? A lot of things that go way back 2,000 years. But ultimately, what brings us back to the church every Sunday when we go to Mass and when we have our kids go through the sacraments is we see the goodness in our children that's coming as a result of our making decisions that are in conformity with the teachings of the Catholic Church. It's sort of, there was I think it was St. Augustine who said, obedience precedes understanding. And sometimes you really truly just have to obey like a child, right? The child wants to know why. We were on the way here, was really kicking my son out of the house to get to Sky Zone, and he was like, no, they're already done jumping, and I'm like, you're going to go because you've been on your rear end playing whatever, you're going to go and you're going to jump around and get in the car, you're going to go and you're going to be there. And he didn't understand what I knew, that if he gets there, he's going to have fun. And when you all have your own kids, you're going to realize how often you've had to twist their arms and kick them out of the house, and then at the end of the day, this was the best day of my life, I'm so glad I did this, right? So they have to obey because they're not going to understand. And frankly, a lot of times this stuff seems like you can't understand. I'm going to make it very understandable for you today. It's a little different in that what I do as a family doctor is I take care of from newborns all the way up to geriatrics, right? But I really love being a family doctor because in my career in medicine, I've always had a different take on being a doctor. Even when I first became a doctor, I used to say, well, there's so many, I said, they take more of a hypocritical oath than a Hippocratic oath. And I meant that. And to this day, I still believe that. And that's why the book that you're all going to get is called The Hidden Truth, Deception in Women's Healthcare. If you decide you want it and you want to read, I'll be happy to give it to you. I wrote this book because I was convinced early on in medicine, when I was learning things, I realized that what I was learning in medical school was that they were having us really promulgate and advertise and insist on everybody getting vaccines against every disease as a primary form of prevention, rather than teaching nutrition and immune health, basic wellness principles that I had learned at Cornell when I took over when I started actually a holistic healthcare study group, literally 40 years ago, if you can believe that. So I've always had this fascination with our bodies and our minds and our spirits and how we can live in conformity to the natural law and be as well as we can be. And we really don't need, and with my patients, I don't insist that the children get vaccinated against every disease that comes around, and certainly I'm not insisting that everybody gets vaccinated right now against the disease of the day. But we also tend to over-medicate, right? I mean, you leave a doctor's office, I have medical students with me, and yesterday I explained to the one medical student, we're trying to figure out this patient's problems, and I said, she's coming up with all these things she wants to do and prescribe for the patient. I said, the best thing you want to do today is we're not going to give them anything. We're not going to give them anything. We're going to let that patient go home. We're going to educate the patient. We're going to have the patient come back and see with the education if he or she got better, right? Because sometimes doing nothing is more therapeutic than just giving people medicines and certainly operating or doing procedures. We all know what can happen with that. Rarely in medicine do we take time to educate, right? So, and I'm saying that too about what we're going to talk about today. We don't take the time, frankly, a lot of doctors don't have the time if they're working for another business to just get them in and out, right? And I know the nurses my wife's a nurse, when they're on the floors, they feel the same way. They're at the computers all day. They can't spend time doing what they learn to do as nurses. Geez, even teachers, I have 3 children who are teachers, they can't even take the time to educate anymore. They're too busy trying to follow all these crazy protocols. So some of you all have these related professions where you see this frustration. So what I'm going to do today is help you understand that what has happened in medicine is we have a lot of confusion out there. This is the most confusing time in my life as a physician when I see patients. People don't understand basic concepts like, when is a boy or a girl? A man, a woman. We don't get political in these talks, but I'm sure you understand that right now in D.C. there's people who are saying you cannot use the term mother, father anymore. That is the rule, actually, right now as we speak in Congress. So I'm hoping you all in this class embrace being mothers and fathers for your children. I also hope you're going to embrace fertility. I thought about this late last night as I was getting ready for the talk, about all the systems in the body, right? All the beautiful way God made our bodies. He gave us a nervous system, a cardiovascular system, a digestive system, right? He gave us a musculoskeletal system. He gave us a reproductive system. The only system in the human body that we routinely destroy or short circuit is the reproductive system. If you were to take out the pancreas, you wouldn't do a great job digesting your food, would you? And if you were to take the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and rewire those peripheral nerves, you know what I'm saying? You can't rewire the body differently than God made it and expect not to have consequences. It's that simple. And yet in the healthcare field, since I've been in healthcare and long before, there was this acceptance that we can do this with women's bodies. We can somehow rewire, reprogram the woman's reproductive tract and get away with it without consequences. I don't know, this is that obedience preceding understanding, guys. I really wanted to drive this home because I don't know what it is about me, but I've always been a guy who fought against things that just didn't make sense since I was like 12 years old. So, and that's just me. And some of you might be out there fighting, but we have got to fight against what God gives us the brain for a reason to know the right thing to do. And then what happens the rest of our lives, and this is true in a lot of areas in our lives, right? It's buried. It's buried by the media. It's buried by the culture. It's buried by everybody out there that says you need to take this or that to do this or that. And yet in your heart, you know there's a right thing to do. So and in your head, and that's really where we're getting with this. Chastity is a beautiful virtue that is just been thrown under the bus, right, in the Latin deck for a long time. I've got 4 daughters, and I got a 12-year-old son. God blessed us with our son, frankly, because my wife and I didn't want to give up our fertility. We actually had 6 miscarriages, if you can believe that. That is crazy. We went through a lot of stuff, but we were blessed with 2 beautiful children after the 3 daughters and then the miscarriages because of another gift that God gave us, which is our fertility, and then how to use progesterone. We're going to talk about that. The Institute of Marriage. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for getting married. I just can't, I get teary when I think about that. How many people do not want to get married anymore? And of course, you all have the right to make informed decisions. So, I can get into this whole confusion about changing boys into girls. There's a clinic over in vice versa in Gainesville. They're starting as early as 12 years of age. 12 years of age with children who have gender confusion. The last time I was at a concert, I sang at the Cornell Glee Club, right? I love singing. I went back for their 150th reunion, and we wear tuxedos. 150 men in tuxedos. Actually, for the reunion, it was more than that because people from all the years. And there was one guy right smack in the middle with a black evening gown and earrings in the Cornell Glee Club. And at that point, the director said that they haven't decided, what they are. And now it's just, and then it was obvious to me where Cornell is going and where a lot of places in our country are going. You just don't, these kids go off to college. You don't even know if your son's going to come back a boy or a girl, right? And this is where we're at. This is what you all need to see. This is so critical. In the womb, God already has decided at the time of conception, right? You all understand chromosomes, perhaps. Go back to that basic 23 plus 23 is 46, and the X's and the Y's, and you have the boy or the girl at conception. But even in the womb, this is a graph showing you the testosterone levels, in basically showing how in male and female, here's birth, here's the first, second, and third trimester. You see how in the womb, in the males, you're seeing this increase in testosterone as they're developing their gonads, as they're developing their male characteristics while they're in their womb, in the womb of their mother. So you're taking these children out, and somehow, 12 years later? See, here's another at 10, of course, when they hit puberty. But they're already not just genetically predetermined to be male and female, but hormonally the factors are there. You're not going to ever, here's the bottom line. Arnold, what's his name? Caitlyn is not Kate, what's her? Bruce. Bruce Jenner will always be Bruce Jenner. I don't care what he turns himself into. He was born Bruce Jenner, he is now Bruce Jenner. He's a man. You can try to turn yourself, but you've already been predetermined. So the next class, for example, and here's another thing. We know we're seeing the end in our society of real men and real women. All right, my wife has a great book called Real Women by Alice von Hildebrand. It's a great, great book. But, you know, and that's another whole topic. But what makes a real woman? And what makes a real man? Well, let's start just biologically, you'll see, right? It's these hormones. But increasingly, these hormones are being diluted in society. We're seeing incredible decreases now in, well, this is just about the gender. I'm going to switch over to the testosterone in a second. I'm just going to see where was that. Oh, shoot, I thought I had a good slide. On that, I wanted to show you that the testosterone levels in society and the sperm counts are going down across all of civilized society, Europe and North America. Not so interestingly enough in South America and Africa. So it has to do, we have a lot of theories about that. Is it the plastic bottles we're drinking out of? Is it the fact that women are on contraception even while they're breastfeeding their little boys? You know, large doses of steroids. So you've got to understand masculinity and femininity. So the next class, for example, I'm going to be out in Montana. I can't be here because my son and I are going to go hunting with his Uncle Bob in eastern Montana. You know, so he's going to do hunter safety, and we're going to get out there and go hunting. And that's because, you know, it's our belief that we want to raise our boy to be a man. Not that everyone has to learn how to shoot, you know, turkeys or whatever, but just to go out and walk with his Uncle Bob and learn the things that you do as a man, all right? And we raised 4 beautiful girls in the same vein, you know, to be wonderful young women who will embrace children when they get married, you know, and embrace those roles. So I'm just asking you all to consider masculinity and femininity and the blurring of roles, the blurring of gender, and trying in your marriages to maintain the fertility. Remember, you have your gender, of course, that's who you're marrying. We're going to talk about fertility and the reproductive cycle. There's a chapter in my book called The Glorious Symphony of the Reproductive Cycle. I'm a musician. I love to think about all the parts of the symphony. Anyone here playing musical instruments at all? Everyone plays something, right? Kazoo. Anyway, you know, but if you put all that together in a symphony, you can't substitute, you know, the oboe with a kazoo, you know, and have beautiful music. These are the requirements for healthy fertility that I discuss also in the book. You know, the man needs to have a healthy amount of testosterone, right? The sperm and the semen, both, the seminal fluid needs to be adequate. I had a gentleman yesterday who had a vasectomy at a young age, and now he met his wife in Catholic match. He had a bad situation for a long time. He actually came into the Catholic Church. Now he's on fire. And I said to him, you know, you're young. You can get your vasectomy reversed. Not only does that help him be able to have a baby in his marriage, but it will actually increase his testosterone level. Men who have vasectomies have low levels of testosterone later in life. I used to do vasectomies, and I'm sad to say, you know, I did way too many of them until I realized what I was doing to men. You know, when you start snipping the vas deferens in men or the fallopian tubes in women, you're not just stopping eggs and sperm from getting one place. You're cutting nerves, vessels, and other things around that then communicate back to the brain in that beautiful symphony, and you're going to mess that person up. So when you're all ready to finish having babies, first of all, pray over that. You're answering questions about that today, probably, how many children you want to have. God is the ultimate author of life. This method I'm going to teach you today works. It really works. There's several methods. So understand the anatomy. You've got the woman's got ovaries. Here's the fallopian tube. We're going to go a little bit into that. Here, in the ovary, I always like to remind women that every month a woman has an ovarian cyst. You may never have heard it put that way, but it's real important to understand that. Every woman has a cyst on her ovaries. I have several women right now who are trying to have babies because I work with infertile couples. And I had one just yesterday, and she had the ultrasound and showed a 2.2 centimeter cyst, which we also call a follicle. That's what's confusing, because the follicle is like, oh, that's good. The cyst, that's bad. No, it's the same thing. All right? This actually gets much bigger because the whole ovary is only about the size of a golf ball. So you say 2.2 centimeters, so really this is a little bit disproportionate. This is much bigger before the egg ruptures out of that cyst or follicle. I say that because all of you know people who've been put on birth control pills because of painful or just cystic ovaries. Or, you can't go that route. This is a normal function. There are times when cysts get too large and we treat them differently. After the woman's ovulated, she produces what basically the most important thing you'll see in a second is you have estrogen leading up to ovulation and progesterone, which is pro-pregnancy. Those two hormones, if you remember no other slide but this one today, all right, getting back to the whole that you're created male and female, this is what you guys need to marry, all right? You need to marry a woman who has this hormonal profile. Now, I'm not going to say every woman does, because a lot of women don't for medical reasons. But the overwhelming majority of women in our culture do not have this hormonal profile, with estrogen going up and away, the cysts getting bigger, bigger, bigger. They ovulate, estrogen comes down a bit, progesterone kicks in, corpus luteum. You're preparing for pregnancy, gestation. You need that progesterone. Our last two babies would not have survived without extra progesterone that we gave them. All the miscarriages that I've been able, but because of the studies I did to prevent, because I give progesterone to women who are in danger of losing those babies. It's an amazing thing. I was blessed. I was recruited actually to Florida by the Catholic Church 22 years ago, and they sent me to Omaha. They said, we're going to pay. The priest, Father McCormick in Orlando, said, you're going to go in Kissimmee. And I did, and I learned all this stuff. And I've been blessed to be able to share with you what I know and share with hundreds of couples this stuff. But unfortunately, when you go on the pill, this is not there. I used to tell women when I wrote for the pill, I'm just giving you estrogens and progesterone, it's all fine. I don't feel well. Okay, we'll give you a different one. I'll give you another one. I'll give you another one. And then next thing you know, it's 15 years of being on the pill. They want to have a baby. They've never had normal fertility, and they're stuck. Then they're coming to me, and I'm trying to help them with their fertility, but that ain't the way to go. You want to marry this. If your wife is taking something now, get her normal, and you're going to learn how to identify. Now, men don't like to talk about women's bodies too often. Well, they do. Actually, we talk about women's bodies a lot. I take that back. But this part we don't talk about. Anyway, this is real important because women need to pay attention to their bodies. I had 4 daughters. And my wife's job, when they became 12, 13, or 11, to let them know that that discharge that they had, that soiled their underwear is normal. That's the estrogen kicking in. This white, clear, watery stuff. And every woman needs to have that every month. It's there for a reason. It's there to allow the woman to get pregnant. It's called fertile mucus. It's fantastic. It's being produced by the glands. It allows the sperm. If you put it on a microscope, this is when the woman has that estrogen effect. That cyst is getting bigger. While the cyst is getting bigger in the ovary, in the cervix, I'll show you in a second, she's producing that mucus. It's coming through the vagina. The sperm love it. It's a sperm magnet. It goes straight through. There's little branches on the side here that actually select out sperm with misshapen heads or bad tails or whatever they've got, so that the body actually has a way of pulling through the healthiest sperm. Again, a reason I'm opposed to in vitro fertilization, because that's when the doctor picks out what he thinks is a healthy sperm and they think is a healthy egg, and they stick it together in a Petri dish. All right, this is the way to do it. Have that healthy mucus, sperm swimming through. After the woman ovulates, this is the best part of natural family planning. I always look forward to this, because the first part's kind of iffy. Woman has your period, you're waiting for this stuff to come in, you're asking your wife, are you fertile yet? Are you fertile? Are you fertile? And then you're fertile, and then it's going to last maybe 4 or 5 days. But when she's dry, when it dries up, you got this. This is like me running through a 350-pound, whatever, defensive bag. Sperm cannot get through progesterone effect. It just dries it up. It's a brick wall. I kid you not. You can't, the methods, I have never, in all the years I've taught natural family planning, seen anyone get pregnant using NFP if they just observe one basic rule, which is wait for the woman to dry up, count 3 days, and then you've got 12 days typically until your period. Those days are safe. It could be more days or less. Now, you can cross-check that. We'll talk about that with other methods, but very important. If you're dry, the sperm will die. When you're wet, the sperm can make it all the way through. And the only reason to wait for 2 or 3 days of drying, I'll show you in a second, all right? This is very important. These are the mucus days. Okay, this is I like this view. This is if you were to look at the cervix. The vagina is up here, the ovaries are way over here. There's glands that are producing the cervical mucus. This is where we do our pap smear, ladies, okay? So there's the vagina down here. these glands are producing mucus, but it stays inside these glands. So even though you get dry on that first day, you still can have mucus higher up inside the cervix. It's called the os. So we tell women to wait at least 2 and often 3 days, and you can actually cross-check with ovulation tests and other things, so it's not quite 3 days. But it's really important, because again, the mucus, as long as that mucus is there, what I used to, so here we go. So I was going to ask you all, how many days, when you have that cervical mucus, do you think the sperm can survive? Any guesses?
5 to 7 days.
Right, yay, 7 days. That's a good guess. 7 days is fine. Some people say 5 to 7 days, so err on the side of 7. So what I'm saying is, she gets wet, let's say she has her period, and then she's a couple of days of dry, and then she's wet. You have intercourse, she hasn't ovulated yet, the cyst is getting larger, but they'll stay in these glands and just hang out. Smoke cigars, watch football, whatever, wait for the ability to ovulate, and then bingo, you can get pregnant. So don't underestimate the power of cervical mucus. Never underestimate. I never said that before.
That's great.
All right, anyway. Uh-oh. Don't underestimate the power of my, now look at that happen. It kind of froze up on me. There we go. Okay, getting back to that, we did that already. Oh yeah, this was an interesting drill, just a quick thing. If you take a bunch of men and you tell them to abstain from sex, right, they just measure serum testosterone levels. And I think it's pretty peculiar that if you go about, so the average testosterone level in males is about 400, you can go way up higher. But in this sample group, 0, and right around, if you notice, the 6th or 7th day, the testosterone level goes up. I just think that's kind of peculiar, because we're usually, when we're asking you to abstain, using a natural method of family planning, how long do you think you need to abstain for, typically? About 7 days, all right? So it can be done. See, the biologists tell us it can be done. And this is the sperm concentration in France. But I can show you study after study showing how sperm counts are going down across the civilized world, and so there's that. Now you already see what I said earlier, or heard what I said about messing up with the reproductive cycle. These are the consequences I see every single day, and I'm not kidding. In my office, I see women who are depressed. I see women who are at risk of breast cancer. If you're on birth control more than 5 years prior to your first pregnancy, because of the changes that you're not allowing to happen in your breast tissue with a normal cycle, it's in my book, you double your risk of breast cancer. It's already 1 out of 8 women. Think about that. You obviously, I've had women with blood clots. I had one nurse that worked down in Celebration Health. I told her, she got married, I didn't want her on the pill, she got on the pill, her doctor put her on the pill. Next day I saw her, next time I saw her, she had a pulmonary embolus, blood clot in her lung from being on birth. She was hypercoagulable. She had a tendency to form clots. Do we check every woman who's put on the pill to see if they have a hypercoagulable state? No, never, ever. We just play Russian roulette, see if you're going to get a stroke or a pulmonary embolus, blood clot. The reason the birth control pills are particularly bad, going back to my 40-year-ago holistic healthcare, is the nutrition that I studied at Cornell. When you put a birth control pill or any artificial steroid in any woman's body, you just measure the urine levels of riboflavin, folic acid, magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin B12. It's literally down the toilet. Literally down the toilet. That is why women have hypercoagulable issues. That's why women have more depression. Folic acid is critical for depression, if any of you have ever studied that. So you can try to supplement that, give them the pill. Actually, they made a birth control pill that came with a multivitamin at one point. I was like, this stuff. Keep the woman normal. And of course, the infertility you heard me discuss. These women are on it forever. And you have to understand what abortifacient means. Abortifacient means that if you look at the pill packet, it says that up to 30 to 40% of the time, the birth control pill will prevent what they used to say the nididation of the fertilized egg. Big word. All that, what it means is, when your sperm gets up all the way out through that fallopian tube towards where the ovaries, this is a cutaway, the ovaries, so they're actually cutting away this tube. Here's where fertilization occurs. This is where the human being begins, right? Life begins at conception. Then we need that 4 to 5 day journey to implant in the womb. Well, what happens is with birth control pills, if you noticed, all the pills in the last generation or two of birth control pills have been progestin-only pills. They have these great names for them, which I won't get into, but they're all giving the woman a light period, very light period. I like the light period. Well, a light period means when that baby is trying to implant in the womb, there's nothing there to implant in. You lose the baby. That's called an abortion in our term. The medical community in the 1980s decided not to call this a human life. the medical community, American College of OBGYNs, in the 80s said, well, let's start saying human life begins after implantation. That makes it a lot easier not to say that we're causing abortions. And that's still a matter of record today. So I'm just letting you all know, you don't know what's going on because you haven't been educated. And you haven't been educated because doctors, well, they're afraid if they don't tell you this, every gynecologist in the country, which is maybe 1% of us don't do this, right? 99% of them are afraid if they tell the truth, they're going to lose business. They're going to lose business. People are going to walk away from, they're going to be ostracized, they're going to, I was actually, and worse than that, I can't tell you the whole story, but I was actually run out of 2 states because I was pro-life, and when I was in Michigan, in Hillsdale, and I was telling people coming to me about this stuff, the only obstetrician in town started a letter writing campaign against me and tried to get me, and did eventually get me kicked off staff, because he said the women coming back to him were upset that he'd put IUDs in them and sterilized them, and why didn't you tell me? And so I was just a new guy in town, so they seriously ran me out of town. But I got recruited to Florida, that's the nice thing. So these are the synthetic sex steroids. All right, I can go on and on, all the names, all the bad names I don't want you guys putting in your bodies. These are also some of the bad things I don't want putting in your body. Skyla, Liletta, Kylena, and Marina. That sounds like 4 little girls, isn't it? Seriously, right? That's the names they choose for these IUDs. It's 3 years of continuous birth control. It's levonorgestrel releasing intrauterine system. Those are IUDs that release hormones so the woman can't have a period. And that's a beautiful thing, isn't it, right? Women without a period is a wonderful thing. No, not. But that's what they're saying now anymore. That is a good thing to take away the reproductive cycle. So I have a lot of fun taking these things out of women who come to me and are just miserable because of the side effects. And this is the real key thing about the progesterone, folks, that when you first get pregnant, you want your progesterone to be about 20. And by the time you finish your progesterone, because you're developing that placenta and you're increasing the blood supply, that's what progesterone does, by the way, it increases the blood supply to the baby. It's got to get up to 150. So we've used progesterone all through the cycle, all through the pregnancy, not just to prevent miscarriages, but even later in pregnancy to prevent toxemia or preeclampsia and premature labor. It works. It's in the New England Journal of Medicine. We know it works here. They don't like to talk about as much preventing miscarriages because if you talk to an obstetrician about a miscarriage, they say, come back and see me when you've had 2 or 3 of them, and then we'll discuss why you're having miscarriages. But what we do with every baby, and I hope you do this, please, your very first pregnancy, ask for a progesterone level, please, and make sure it's 20. And if it's 10 or less, ask your doctor to put you on progesterone, because why wait till you have a first miscarriage to start worrying about, and especially for couples who've been waiting a long time. My book talks about how when you're on the birth control pill, you double your risk of cervical cancer from HPV. I have a whole section here on human papillomavirus because I'm very passionate about, again, educating young people that this is a sexually transmitted disease, that when we're giving 11-year-old boys and girls a vaccine against HPV, we're basically assuming they're going to get a sexually transmitted disease with a vaccine that we really don't have much information about long-term effects of. This is really typical in the healthcare community. So when I went to a talk on cervical cancer, and he did all the risk factors for cervical cancer, he talked about smoking, he talked about multiple sexual partners. Yeah, that's true. I said, why did you talk about birth control pills? And the doctor from Columbia said, well, let's keep that to ourselves. This is in front of 400 doctors in Orlando. And the reasoning, I get this, is that we don't want to tell women to come off of the pill because clearly, which is worse, pregnancy or cervical cancer? Which is worse, pregnancy or pulmonary embolism? Which is worse, pregnancy or breast cancer? In the mind and the eyes and the soul of medicine nowadays, pregnancy is a disease to be avoided at all costs. I'm just telling you, this is part of a population control mentality that has seeped into healthcare since I've been in it. So it's kind of scary. All right, so please understand, I have a lot here. I can talk about HPV, but that's another. This is what it looks like when you put acetic acid on the cervix and you see the HPV effect. And I like to tell women the only reason for a pap smear is to screen for a sexually transmitted disease. That's it, period, end of story. My wife has not had a pap smear in probably 20 years now. I think she had one just to prove me wrong. She thought she could prove me wrong. And I said, you're not going to, so the point is, you cannot have cervical cancer without HPV. You cannot get HPV unless you've gotten it from another sexual partner. It is a sexually transmitted disease. So, very important. Again, education. why do women allow themselves to have things done to them and never ask for information? Because we doctors have said no. We just said, no, you're not entitled to that information. We are no better than you. I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but that's how it is. And you can tell me I've been fighting against that. These tubal implants, the E-shirts, were a horrible thing that happened. You look up the history of that. Erin Brockovich actually got over it. If you remember this movie, Erin Brockovich, she actually, after that movie, got into the fact that women were having these rods stuck up into their fallopian tubes and then ended up having premature hysterectomies and a lot of problems. The FDA, after about 15 years and 50,000 of these things, finally said every doctor needs to give every woman a 40-page pamphlet to read. 40 pages of information. Within 2 months of that, it was taken off the market. Because, of course, no doctor wants to educate a woman. So again, stay with the hormones. Now, stay natural. So this is the end. This is going to say, now see, I used to give this talk on natural family planning, right? And now I've changed. If you already know the natural family planning, I'm just going to real quickly do a review, but you have learned what you need to know today, I believe. Most of it. You can go and learn more online. My wife and I first learned one called the symptothermal, where you take your temperature, but then we transitioned to one where you just have to watch the mucus, because honestly, that cervical mucus is the key to fertility. You don't have it, you're not fertile, and if you know how to monitor it, you can know when you're fertile. And then one of the beautiful developments that the whole sets are learning, and I'm really advocating, is using the ovulation kit, the urine ovulation kit, to kind of cross-check the mucus if you are able to. So just real quick, because I don't know how I am with time, maybe 5 more minutes, right? We're good?
You're fine.
All right. These are heroes. They should have got a Nobel Prize. They certainly are in heaven. Dr. John Littell and Billings, they were researchers in Australia. He's a pediatrician, and I forget her specialty. One of them was neurology, one of them was pediatrics. He was doing all the lab studies in the 1950s, and his partners working on birth control pills, some of them, the development of the birth control pill. But they were Catholic, and they didn't want to go that route, so they're saying, how can we measure hormones in the lab and tell women when they're fertile? She and her associates went to the male researchers and said, guys, we have this stuff going on in our body every month, and I wonder if we can somehow correlate that to what you're seeing in the lab. And with a lot of convincing, she finally convinced them that the observations that they're making on their body were more reliable even than the laboratory results. It was amazing. It was like amazing stuff. So she, Lynn Billings, and her colleagues in Australia really propelled this. It was so good that Mother Teresa in India ended up insisting that all her sisters learn this method in India to teach to the poor in India as a method of birth control. And they went to China. China, the #1 method of birth control, all right, so China, horrible country, we all get it. All right, 1 child, forced sterilization, horrible things. But the only alternative that they gave people in China to forced sterilization and abortion was to learn this method. And they learned it. And they had very good reasons to learn it, because they only have, so 1 child, and then they didn't want to be sterilized, and they didn't want to have bad things happen. So anyway, they taught, because they went over to China, and they said, listen, rather than that, we're going to teach them this, and they used it. So 1953. Again, you understand, when we first learned this method, we had little stamps. Actually, a lady came in my office a couple of weeks ago with the stamps on her chart. You know, green, white, the stamps showing where she was. Red stamps for menstruation, little baby stamps for when she had the cervical mucus, and then the other stamps, green stamps. This is an actual photograph of the cervix, just to let you see how the opening, I call it the OS, where the baby comes out, that goes up to 10 centimeters, right? It's pretty big when the baby's coming out. But anyway, every month it doesn't get that big, but it does open a little bit every month, and the cervical mucus starts coming out. And when we do a pap smear here, it literally, I used to, as a medical student who knew nothing about this, it was a nuisance. We said, this stuff's, it's a mess. And actually, many doctors still think this is a sign of disease. They don't understand this is normal stuff. You want that. And then you dry up, and then look what happens. About the 4th day after you ovulate, the opening of the cervix actually closes up. In addition to drying up, you're closing up shop for the next 12 days or however many days in your period. So God has given us the ability to learn this. And now you can learn, you can go home, and this is the old stamps that we used to use, and we still have some charts around our house, but you'd show the period, the days you had intercourse early on, and then the cervical mucus kicks in, and then you wait and see 1, 2, 3, and then you can have eyes all the way through there, all right? But anyway, that's the old way, and there's other, now you all have apps. You know, you just download any app for any of this stuff, and the women are amazing, they come in. I love this though. I met the lady who developed this in Latin America. in Guatemala, and she just goes and she tells women, when you're dry, there's no crops, right? When it's moisture, you got the crops, and when you're dry, there's no crops. I mean, just people who are totally illiterate can understand you need the moisture to reproduce. You need the moisture to reproduce. And if you leave with nothing else than that, you're good. So, wow, that was a marathon. I want to thank you all. I do want to take a couple of questions at least. It's kind of fair to leave you. I'm educating you, but does someone have a question? If you do, please, it's the time. Anybody? Yeah, you want to just, yes, ma'am.
What about the IUDs that don't have any hormones?
Yeah, the copper T's, okay? So what they are, they were the original ones. What they are doing is more than anything interfering with implantation. So you have a normal cycle. You're developing the lining of the uterus called the endometrium, so it's not keeping it thinned out like the chemical ones do. You're having fertilization, baby's trying to implant, unable to implant, therefore heavy period. So I have a woman that's coming in next week to have her copper T taken out because her periods are just painful and heavy. The other thing I see with IUDs, which is not talked about much, but I've seen so much of this, I have to say, it's just this kind of chronic discomfort, pelvic pain and discomfort that a lot of women get when they have the IUD in there. And I argue it's an immune system thing, right? You've got a thing inside your body that doesn't belong there, and your body is trying to figure out how the heck to get rid of it. That's what I can say about anything. So you're putting something in the body that doesn't belong there. Your body's trying to expel it, and so you can get lymph nodes around the pelvis, you get discomfort and vague symptoms, including fatigue and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, yeah, I don't like them obviously, but that's the push. Right now, American College of OBGYN wants every teenager, I have these articles, to get on a LARC. You'll see it, long-acting reversible contraception. Now reversible is a joke because it's not. Long-acting, every teenager, this is their official policy, to put every teenager on either Depo-Provera, which I used to call Depo poison, horrible, all of it's horrible, implants in the arms, Nexplanon, Implanon, you name it, I've taken those out. I've got one coming up, the lady gained about 60 pounds, this thing is buried so deep in her arm, it's going to be very hard to find, but they get gained so much weight. All right? The reason it's long-acting is because they can't stop using it. When you give a girl a Depo-Provera shot every 3 months, it stops her periods. When you put this in, she can't take it out. When you put the IUD in, they can't take it out. This is what every teenager they want, rather than birth control pills, which they can stop taking if they don't want. So this is the mentality that you're dealing with when you see really nice doctors. And I got to end with that too, or say it. These are friends of mine that are doing this. I mean, the doctors in this town, the doctors in Orlando. I mean, I know a lot of these OBs. They're very good friends of mine. They tie tubes, they put IUDs and Nexplanon in. I did this, I wrote for birth control pills. I was told for years by people to stop because I'm a Catholic doctor. And it really, my book I'm going to give you, but it really is my wife and I, our decision after 3 daughters not to do it, more for medical reasons, frankly. And then eventually I needed to learn, and the more conferences I went to, and the more my eyes were opened up, and I was like, wow, I needed to convince myself. It's kind of like, I guess you can put this on tape, but it's kind of like what's happening today in society with COVID, right? You know, people will wear masks everywhere. I don't. I don't argue with people who wear masks everywhere. I just say, you've already made your mind up. I've done the research. I know what I need to do or not do, or the vaccine, or to not going to church or anything. Everyone's making their minds up, but once you've made your mind up, you've decided you're going to stay with that, right? You don't want anyone to tell you otherwise. And so I'm hoping all of you, I know I can tell by looking at you all, you're thinking about this, and you're going to give it some thought to go back to the natural way, to enhance the romance. It really works well. And the communication you've heard about already, I'm sure. When husbands take an interest in their wives about their fertility, that wife really feels respected. And one of the things we see most often in society is a lack of respect for women. A lack of respect. Women are being treated horribly, horribly. And so anything we can do to get the boyfriends and the young husbands to really respect the women and exercise self-control, sexual self-control, I believe it also I know it's blessed our family in many ways. Okay, that was a long answer. So you probably don't ask me, or you can ask one more question. Anyone have questions? Yes, ma'am.
What about the NuvaRing? Does that have the same effect as using the pill?
Yeah, NuvaRing is a chemical. I believe it's etonogestrel, levonorgestrel. That there's one that you can swap out every month, right? So you still have a period. But you have to remember, and I'm glad you're asking these questions, because You have to remember all of those, I had that list of the steroid chemicals. Every single one of them is still not allowing you to have natural estrogen and progesterone. It's stopping the pituitary gland from communicating with the ovary, all right? And in so doing, you're putting yourself at risk of all those same things. So yes, it has all the same side effects as the pill and everything else I discussed. Get back to normal. Yes?
How difficult is to reverse a tube ligation?
Not so hard. There's a list of doctors. There's a group called One More Soul that can reverse tubals and they identify, there's a doctor in Atlanta that I know about, that they actually do it as a ministry to people who want to reverse. Like the guy I saw yesterday, I said, call One More Soul. They have a sterilization reversal. It's not that hard to do the reversals. Getting the fertility isn't always guaranteed, but the reversal is actually fairly simple for people who do it. And very much worthwhile. I told him that. I said, you're going to feel not just better about yourself as a new Catholic, but you're going to feel better biologically because you're going to have those communications happening again. And the chances of going into premature menopause or premature testosterone deficiency are much less. That's good stuff, right? Yes, sir.
What about prenatal vitamins?
Oh, yeah. Good.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I'm a big vitamin guy. No, thank you for sharing this. Take prenatal vitamins before you get pregnant. You know, don't wait till you're pregnant because so many women are deficient in folic acid. Just like right now with the COVID, I'm taking vitamin D and zinc and C every day. You know, and I actually think we should start doing that every year during cold and flu season. You know, we're all learning things this year, but it is amazing stuff. So every woman should be on prenatal vitamins to make up for those deficiencies. Because not all of us. My daughters are always teaching me how to eat better. I guess they eat a lot of kale these days, huh? But you know, you guys know, right? There's a lot of easier, healthier ways to eat than the way we were raised. You know, meat and potatoes and maybe occasional salad. So yeah, prenatal vitamins start before with a full gram of folic acid. Thank you. Great question. Yeah?
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
He's been our doctor for a while before we had a kid. And I'll tell you that everything that he has taught, at first my husband was like, ah. And now he knows when I'm fertile and when I'm not. He almost tracks it better than I do. We've been married now for 4 years, and we have a baby who's 3 years old. And we've not wanted to have a kid for a while. And it does work. You have to study and really learn your body, but it works really, really well. Now we're at the point where we are trying, which I don't think I've told you yet.
You see where I'm going with this? I feel sometimes, I've been saying this a lot with what's going on in our country these days, I feel like I'm part of a secret society of doctors. It really, more than ever, I really do. I sometimes really have to watch my back because the things I say, not just about this, but if you watch my YouTubes, there's other things I've said about what's going on in our country right now. But, you know, we just got to get back to what I said earlier. Listen to that voice inside. Listen to the reasoning abilities that God gave us. You guys can figure this out. And stop listening to the nonsense that our culture's throwing out, that they're calling normal. Especially now, it's not normal. It's scary. It's really scary. We want our boys to be boys, our girls to be girls, and we want marriages to last a long, long time. So, and I offer that service, by the way. If any of you, I'll get you the book, but just call me anytime. I'm always on call. If you have a problem, if you have an issue with a doc, you know, call me. You know, my thing is saving marriages, saving families, saving children, and being a good Catholic. All right, God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.